Hello, my name is Amanda Vredenburgh. I am a PhD candidate in French and Francophone Studies at Indiana University. My primary research areas include contemporary French and Francophone fiction, the literary fantastic, and eco-criticism. And before beginning with my paper, I also want to quickly thank the organizers of the Colloquium, which surely would have been a very rich event in person. But thank you as well for giving us the chance to share our work virtually. My paper today is entitled Mourning the Loss of the Land in Clézio's Villa Aurore and Orlamonde. In light of the ever-increasing threat of large-scale environmental destruction, the recent concept La collapsologie, developed by Pablo Servigna and Raphael Stevens in their bestseller Comment tout peut s'effondrer from 2015, uses an apocalyptic discourse to raise awareness about the urgency of the crisis. By positing the inevitability of certain forms of collapse, environmental, but also cultural, economic, and social, La collapsologie shifts our approach from uniquely finding ways of understanding and preventing environmentally induced changes to also responding to them. Servigna and Stevens claim that there's a void to be filled, un trait d'union à faire entre ces grandes déclarations scientifiques rigoureuses et globales et la vie de tous les jours, qui se perd dans les détails, le fouillis des imprévus et la chaleur des émotions. Their project addresses this need by discussing the lived experience of collapse, which, as the authors state, resembles the stages of grief. Specifically, we experience grief over a certain vision of the future that we are forced to abandon. But this grieving process is also necessary in order to envision the possibilities that collapse opens up for the future. This talk will contribute to this discussion through its focus on the way fiction might help us to confront such changes brought about by the devastation of the landscape. Through its analysis of two short stories by Clézio, Villa Aurore and Orlamonde, it will discuss the therapeutic potential of fiction that engages with the psychological impact of environmental destruction on individuals. By using ruins to represent the landscape as a place of memory, dreams, and escape, Clézio shows us that environmental loss generates a profound reevaluation of the self. However, this reevaluation positively impacts the main characters by allowing them to move beyond anger and nostalgia towards acceptance, thereby constituting an exemplary model for the reader who identifies with their situation of loss. Both stories are found in Clézio's collection of short stories, La Ronde des Autres Faits divers from 1982, and figure border spaces that bring together oppositions such as city and countryside, past and present, childhood and adulthood, human and non-human. The first story, Villa Aurore, is split into two parts. The first recounting the narrator's childhood when he explored the overgrown garden surrounding the villa. Everything about the place was shrouded in an aura of mystery, including the villa's elusive occupant, whom the narrator never saw, as he explored the garden, also occupied by hundreds of stray cats and wild birds. The garden allowed him to immerse himself in the natural landscape, disconnected from the human world, so that he could listen to the sound of the rain on the palm leaves and hide among the bushes to whistle along with the birds. But most importantly, the mysterious garden was a place of escape, that fed the narrator's imagination, so that when he glimpsed the Greek word adorning the temple in the garden, he states, Je pouvais m'en aller rien que sur ce nom, comme dans un autre monde, comme si j'entrais dans un monde qui n'existait pas encore. The garden is therefore closely linked to his childhood, embodying but also producing a spirit of adventure, thanks to its wild nature, soft shadows, elusive inhabitant, and indecipherable structures. The second part describes the narrator's return to the villa as a college student, when he is forced to confront the environmental changes the area has undergone, in addition to his own transition to adulthood. There are no more villas and gardens, all replaced by big apartment buildings and parking lots. The Villa Aurore loses its bright white color, stained gray due to exhaust fumes from the new road that encircles it. Here, ruins are not mysterious vestiges from the past, like the Greek temple, but unfinished construction sites from the present that demolish the gardens. Partout, il y avait ces jardins éventrés, ces ruines, ces plaies béantes creusées dans la terre, en haut de la colline. As we see in the violent imagery here, ces jardins éventrés, ces plaies béantes, le Clézio represents this new urban landscape as a place wounded by human ideas of modernity and progress, one characterized by emptiness, which gives the impression of death. The use of these terms, le vide, l'impression de la mort, points to the sterility that results from our abuse of the land, and in conjunction with the way the narrator affectively reacts to the changes of landscape through worry, fear, and pain, it associates the narrator's experience with that of grief. In fact, these feelings of emptiness and an impression of death also overtake the narrator himself as he loses part of his past and thus his sense of belonging to the environment. He explains, Ce qui était inquiétant surtout, c'est que je ne parvenais plus à retrouver mes souvenirs à présent. Ce qui existait aujourd'hui avait effacé d'un seul coup tous mes souvenirs d'enfance, laissant seulement la sensation douloureuse d'un vide, d'une mutilation, un malaise vague, aveugle, qui empêchait mes sentiments d'autrefois de se rejoindre avec ceux du présent, dépossédés, exilés, trahis, ou peut-être seulement exclus. Alors, il y avait pour moi ce goût de mort, ce goût de néant. But this sense of loss in which he feels split from his former self is not just a question of familiarity, of feeling like an outsider in what was once his home. The changes he remarks in the landscape, particularly the noise and light, suggest that certain characteristics he possessed while living there as a child, notably his active imagination, are no longer possible in this new setting. Since there's no more silence and no more soft shadows filtered by the leaves, only stark contrasts of bright light and complete shadow, the magical environment that previously fed his fantasies has also disappeared. As the narrator states, il n'y avait plus d'ombre à présent, plus de secret. So he can no longer find the sense of mystery, adventure, imagination that were present in the overgrown garden of his childhood. We can certainly read this as the recognition that the narrator has moved beyond childhood. However, given the important role of environmental loss in this story, I propose that we should also read it more literally and identify the close connection between place and psychological experience. An ecological reading of this tale suggests that loss of landscape is accompanied by important forms of personal and cultural loss, particularly the loss of images, memory, and thus identity. Surprisingly, in the end, the narrator does not endeavor to preserve what remains of his childhood playground, but leaves, abandoning the villa and its occupant to the mercy of modern progress. The old woman who lives there had posted an announcement looking for a student to live with her to protect her and the house from the architects, builders, and the mayor who are trying to frighten her away from the land so that they can build even more apartments. But rather than accepting such a task and returning to the magical land of his childhood, he instead accepts the destruction to come and leaves without ever speaking to the old woman about his memories. He explains how, upon understanding that the house would inevitably be destroyed like the rest of the neighborhood, le vide est entré en moi. Again, the external characteristics of the new landscape are internally adopted by the narrator, who lets the emptiness of the concrete suburb overwhelm him. But because the narrator chooses to leave the house, this emptiness also suggests that he has moved beyond the fears and pain that plagued him throughout the tale, and has transitioned to a state of nothingness that is not simply one of loss, but also one of acceptance from which he can rebuild. It is a dark ending, one that communicates the inevitability of environmental loss that can't always be prevented, at least on an individual level. But it also gives us some hope that through a similar process of mourning, we may come to accept environmental loss and move on to alternatives. And by emphasizing the connection between the psyche and environmental destruction, it gives us as readers reason to act before we get to that point of no return. In our second story, Orlamonde, we see that the landscape has many of the same characteristics as in Villa Aurore. The protagonist, a girl named Anna, who is trying to come to terms with her father's death and her mother's illness, escapes the pain of her familial situation by visiting the ruins of an old theater by the sea. There, the ruins, appropriately called Orlamonde, Orlamonde, allow her a similar form of escape as we saw with the narrator of Villa Aurore, since c'est l'endroit du monde où l'on voit le mieux la mer et le ciel, rien d'autre que la mer et le ciel, comme si la terre et les hommes avaient cessé d'exister. It is an isolated, secret place where no one can find her. Like the villa's garden, it is also a place where she can concentrate more fully on the natural landscape, since she sees nothing other than the sea and the sky. And it is also a place of dreams. But rather than simply allowing her imagination to run free, to imagine adventures, Anna's refuge grants her a new perspective on the difficulties she is facing. When Anna dreams of her mother, healthy as she once was after resting on the beach, the narrator specifies, c'est pour la voir qu'Anna vient ici, dans sa cachette, en haut de la muraille. This reassuring image that Anna is searching for brings her comfort amid uncertain times, but not by avoiding the situation entirely. Adopting the perspective as a seagull that flies over the city, elle n'oubliait pas, non, mais les gens et les choses de l'autre monde n'avaient plus la même importance. Her elevated vantage point allows her to think of her mother's illness without feeling as much pain. So she can also soak up the sun's warmth and later transmit this healing energy to her mother. Elle lui tenait la main très fort et la lumière et la couleur de la mer entraient dans le corps de sa mère. We thus see how such close contact with nature helps the protagonist as she grapples with the pain of her mother's sickness, which implicitly argues for its preservation. As a space separated from the worries and fears of our daily lives that allows for reflection, a wider perspective, and imagination, we can identify the crucial role that natural landscapes might play in psychological processes such as illness and grief. However, it is the destruction of the old theater, her gateway to the sea and the sky, that allows Anna to directly confront loss and to experience grief, which we can surmise prepares her to confront her mother's illness and the potential loss it may bring. On the day the ruins are to be destroyed, she no longer feels calm while gazing at the sea. Elle sait qu'elle est seule. Personne d'autre n'était avec elle, et c'est comme si elle attendait la mort. Avant, elle croyait que ce n'était pas difficile d'attendre la mort. Il suffisait d'être indifférente, dure comme un caillou, et la peur ne pouvait entrer. Mais aujourd'hui, seule dans sa cachette, elle tremble de tout son corps. We see how Anna, who chooses to remain in the ruins, sa maison, even if she must die along with them, is forced to embrace the fear she had previously tried to suppress. Indeed, when the wrecking ball knocks down part of the structure, c'est au fond d'elle que la masse pesante cogne, aveuglément, s'acharne, fait tomber les murs, défonce les planchers, tord les structures métalliques qui grincent, avance peu à peu vers la muraille de pierre, debout devant la mer et le ciel. Her internal protective walls have been breached, and although she is initially frozen, unable to speak due to fear and anger, upon seeing her friend Pierre, she shrugs her shoulders and thinks, "Il faudra bien trouver autre chose." The end of the story, therefore, leaves us with a sense of hope that life may continue, that other possibilities will come along. The last sentence of the story tells us that, despite her loss, le reflet du soleil sur la mer brille sur le visage et dans les yeux sombres de la petite fille, avec la lumière, connaît-on pas de la colère. The healing light that we saw brought peace to Anna and comforted her mother, nevertheless remains. In conclusion, we can look back to the Greek to the Greek word written on the temple in Villa Aurore to recognize the potential of literature to intervene in the environmental crisis. C'était un mot qui ne voulait rien dire, un mot simplement pour ouvrir la porte de l'autre monde à celui qui le regardait. Mais quand on cessait de le voir, quand on cessait d'y croire, le mot s'effaçait, il perdait son pouvoir, il redevenait semblable à tous les autres mots qu'on voit sans les voir. This discussion of the word can be read as a reflection on literature itself, which, if we are receptive to its message, uses words to open up different possibilities, to show us paths for change, but also, as we've seen, for response to unprecedented forms of loss, as globally we are now experiencing for the first time with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's perhaps not surprising that in response to a situation most people have never experienced and which lacks recent historical examples, many people are turning to novels for guidance, such as Camus' La Peste, to make sense of this troubling time and to work through their feelings of grief. In their work on la collapsologie, Pablo Servigne and Raphael Stevens discuss the importance of stories for shaping our collective identity and showing us how our world could be adjusted or transformed. They claim that, going forward, stories will be an essential part of producing a positive response to collapse. So that instead of suspicion, individualism, and violence, as we often see in apocalyptic Hollywood films, we can respond with trust, collective action, and mutual aid. Our analysis similarly suggests that fiction holds the potential to supplement fact-driven scientific research through an affective intervention that helps the reader to mourn the different forms of loss produced by the environmental crisis, so that we don't get stuck in our memories of the past or the vision of the future that we once held. After all, as Anna thinks, il faudra bien trouver autre chose. Thank you very much. Au revoir.